Hi, I'm George. Welcome to GMakes, and this is my quick overview for my node setup and render for November 2022 days number 3 and 4, Psychedelic Alley. So you can see my final render is right here. It's this nice little animation of I thought alley. I went through a couple versions of this, and I ended up on like bowling alley. Um, because psychedelic. Those bowling animations. You got the fun carpet in there usually. Sometimes there's like an arcade. So, this is a setup. Everything in here. I'll switch to this mode. Everything in here is 100%. This is all in one GeoNodes tree. All the textures are procedural. The camera, of course, I mean, it's not GeoNodes, but camera and lights are all within Blender. There's nothing external, no like FSpy, no nothing like that. So this is not a tutorial per se, but it's a quick overview of kind of my thought process, the way I connected things, and how I built out this little animation right here. So to start off, I'll just kind of turn off those very garish textures. We have the GeoNodes. So again, I probably should label that better, but it's just cube that I started with, just the default cube, and then added GeoNodes modifier to it. And if we take a look at this tree, there's only a couple aspects actually to it. So it's actually pretty simple, nothing super fancy going on to achieve this effect. So first I have these are just duplicates of each other. You can see they're both called spiral. So this is just this main spiral, which if we go ahead and take a look at, it's this, and then it's spinning like a corkscrew, and then this other one right here, boop, is the same. It just spins twice as fast. So if we go back to my first one, basically I have a spiral is the set, the normal or the base geometry for this is just a spiral. Then I modified it, I changed the rotations, the height, the end radius, just to match the length of what I have, or just the size I wanted. And then a transform to kind of get this rotation going. So this is the Z rotation. So I just have it changing that. So it's this combine XYZ just only on the Z rotation. Then I have the scene time controlling that, and I have it divided to really slow it down. Just 6 is the divide by 6, so 6 times as slow I'm at 30 frames per second, and this is like 4 seconds or 120 frames. So whatever the math comes out to, how fast this is spinning. I just liked how that looked. And then I have another transform after that to rotate the actual spiral itself, so it's not just straight up and down. And it's just about 90 degrees, slightly down because of the way the perspective looked. And then I reversed the curve because otherwise it's going that way. You don't need to do this if you like change which is the end and which is the start, but I didn't do that when I did this originally. So I just reversed it. That's the easiest way to fix that. And then I set the curve to mesh, and I use actually, I first had a curve circle, but then I changed it to this curve line. And that's why we get this kind of corkscrew pattern looking, and then you can really control, like, you can control even more the angle of this and everything. I just have it along the Z axis to give me that kind of depth and that more like spread out look. And then I set the curve radius with using the spline parameter. That's why it gets thinner as it goes long, the length of the spine. Spline parameter, length, and then I also have this divide just so that you can control that a bit more. Otherwise, if I mute that, it looks like that. So that's why I have that divide in there. And then you can also, I have this same divide from the scene time controlling the set curve tilt. So that way when it animates, you get this. I guess it actually doesn't do anything in the long run. But that was there because I was messing around with this set curve tilt where I have it set to 12.4, but I guess it's really not doing anything right now. But basically you can change the kind of the angle of everything it's looking at. So I'll just connect that because maybe it was doing something. Who knows? You see, as I kind of changed ideas and directions, things kind of got lost in the weeds of my node tree. But these two are exactly the same. These are the two spirals. So right there. So then combined together, one is just spinning twice as fast and has twice as many rotations and everything. So it covers up some of those gaps. Because if this one isn't here, if it's just this first one, you can see the gaps in the spiral. So I just wanted to add a little more motion to it and make it a little more psychedelic. So that's the main base of that geometry. And then the thing I'm actually really happy with is right down here. We'll actually just go from here. Is this bowling pin? I made a bowling pin. No hard surface modeling. This is all geometry nodes, so you can kind of fix and change everything you want in it. I can actually go ahead and fill. Not that one. This one and that one. I don't know. Anyway, basically this is similar to if in my like mushroom GeoNodes mushroom tutorial, how we made like the cap in that one. Well, basically I have this Bezier segment, and then I turn it to curve to mesh, and then I have two of those, so this is the other first one. And you can see it looks real weird because then as I make that a curve to mesh, I use a curved circle, so then it gets rotated around that circle, and just how geometry nodes work out, and then I change it around, and I merge those together, and so we got the top and the bottom. So you can see like you can really mess with how things look. Like you can make it a vase, you can make gooseneck. But I just did it, merged those two Bezier segments together using that curve to mesh to get this nice pin looking thing. And I'm really happy with it. It worked out pretty darn well. And then I just have a cylinder, which I turned into a triangle. And then I subdivided it once, and then I instance on it. So you don't get quite like the 10 bowling pins. So I was like, it doesn't really matter. And I like how this looks. And this was pretty simple and straightforward. Don't have to think a lot about it. And then set my material, and I did this also animation of it moving forward and back. And this little limits cross right here is just for the camera, so the camera stays focused on that point throughout the whole time. So kind of the feel I want is both as if the pins are coming towards you, but also maybe like you're the ball and you're going towards the pin. So I kind of wanted it to say as though the pins are always in focus. But yeah, and then they rise out of the floor, all that jazz. And speaking of the floor, it's just this grid right here. It's just a grid, nothing, just a plain, nothing particularly fancy. This was another grid I had at once that was going to be my background, but then I changed it last minute, so that's actually don't actually need that at all, so we can just get that right out of here. But yeah, so that's the base setup for everything. Again, no textures. It looks like this. I think it's pretty fun. It's really kind of weird and crazy, and then I just was like, well, I have a pretty weird motion. I like the idea of the I like the idea of the pins and everything. So let's get to texturing. And this is where it changed a lot, and also I had a wild fun time. So the main texture for like these spirals, which is just called Alley Spiral, is a magic texture, and I actually really like how this alley texture looks, or yeah, how this magic texture looks. So the magic texture is this weird thing. It's just funky. You change the distortion, it changes the kind of style of it. You can also change the scale, as a lot of things you can. And then I have that set up to an emission texture, so it glows. And then the big thing that I did for this is that I took this magic texture. First of all, I changed all these output coordinates are from the object, so that way they kind of stick to it. They're not just generated, even though generated kind of also gives it that feel of, which is the standard, gives it that feel of like nothing's quite solid. So I actually kept that for some things occasionally. But I kept it mostly things on the object, so that way they stuck to the object as it was animated. So I have it. I have a magic texture, which I have through that whole system, that mapping system. And then I have a checker texture, which I've blended with it. So checker texture is blended with it. So you can see no checker texture, checker texture. And that checker texture has two more magic textures going into it. That just, I've changed the distortion, the scale, everything on those, and the scale of the checkers, just to give this weird kind of almost pixelated look. And then for the second spiral, I just copied that texture, but then I changed a couple of things, like the checker texture is actually through the generated coordinates, so it doesn't really move. It looks kind of funky. And then I've also changed like the distortion and the scale and everything. And also I've rotated it a little bit as well, that checker texture. So yeah, that's the basic of those fun textures. I like how it looks. I think it's a lot to look at, but I think it kind of really works to get this kind of tunnel going. And then nothing super special for like the wood. I messed around with the saturation and colors of this because it kept looking too dull because I had it like an actual like wood color. So I ended up going more with this just bright orange yellow. Pretty standard kind of wood stuff where it's like a brick texture that I've modified to look more like a wood. I added a little bit of grain. It's not super realistic, but it was just there to add a little bit more texture. And then I made it pretty darn shiny, just kind of wanted that reflection of the pins. And then I also added Musgrave to give a little more wibbly wobbliness to it, as to those reflections as they go through. Again, all through the object coordinates, so that way it sticks. Because I also animated, I actually animated this texture moving, so that way it would track with the pins moving. Again, make it be like maybe we're moving on the floor. And then the last texture here is pretty straightforward as well. It's the pins. This one's the simplest of them all. I have geometry input separating XYZ, going to a compare node, and then a mix of white and black. So this is just to get that band on there. The compare and the epsilon controls how big and thick and where that band lives on the pins. And then I have them also I just kept this principal BSDF and then just did an emission. I plug the color also into the emission of one, just because I kept getting lost in the render a little bit. And in the compositing. And the compositing is also where this really comes in, because this base animation is pretty psychedelic. It's kind of funky. But then I just kind of had fun in the compositor. So if I actually go here and let me render out just a frame where you can kind of see the pins a bit. So let's just do there. Also, I have, of course, like bloom enabled and motion blur and screen space reflections. I upped the shadows a little bit, the cascade size, just because they were looking a little chunky, and I want them a little more smooth. So if we just render an image out, again, I'm in Eevee, so this takes half a second. There we go. We go to compositing. So now I have all of these nodes for my compositing. And basically what I'm doing here is I brighten the image a little bit, because all this compositing, kind of these layers I have, really dulls the image colors in the end. And then I have an alpha over, because I have nothing in the back there. And so this alpha over really, basically, you'll see, I think a hole should pop up. Wow, bunch of fun stuff to happen there. But basically what it does is it adds this render image. I've scaled it down and put it in the back, because there was like a gap in the back of my render where there was alpha. So it kind of makes an almost infinite hallway looking thing in the little bit between the pins popping back up again, which you can see in the animation. And then I have just a glare node just to brighten it up a little bit. And this is also set to ghosts. So it actually adds these like kind of specters and these memories and these kind of weird iterations of all the light, all the emission textures. I also have a directional blur going on where I've rotated the image a bit, so you can see there where it's straight and there it curves. Just a little more tilt to it and a little more funkiness around the edges. And then I have a couple of filters up here. So I have a box sharpen, which if that goes away, you can see that softened up a bit. The main one here is the Sobel, I think is how it's pronounced. We go Sobel, excuse me, we take that off, and that kind of gets rid of some of those. It makes it a lot softer, but I like those kind of outlines, again, because things kept getting lost. And then we mix those together, and then finally, over the whole image, we do another Sobel. We take that away. You can see it's pretty soft, but then we add a little more of that contrast back into it with the Sobel. And then we export it out. So yeah, that's it. That's basically this whole process I went through. Again, started doing like an actual alley, and then came up with like, I like the bowling pins, then figure out how to make it in geometry nodes, like model the pin, and do this kind of fun, simple. I always had this idea of kind of the spirals, but yeah, and I think it looks kind of neat, even just as like unrendered just in the viewport. But a lot of fun. I wanted to really use the magic textures, because I just think they're funky. So yeah, that's it. That's the overview for November 22, days number 3 and 4, Psychedelic Alley. If you like this overview or want maybe more tutorials and stuff or anything, if you have any comments or questions, leave them down in, well, the comments below. And if you want kind of more of this content, I'm going to be doing this for all the renders I do for November over this month, these overviews. So if you want to keep up to date on that or see any of my other actual tutorials, subscribe for more. And yeah, I'll catch you next time. Oh, you can also follow me on Twitter now at gmakes3d, where I'll be posting the final renders for November, as well as like behind the scenes things, anything I don't think is worth of a video, but it's just like short things I've been experimenting with, things like that. So go ahead and follow that as well on Twitter. at gmakes3d. It's in the end of the video. It's also going to be in the description. And yeah, take care. Hope you enjoy this, and I'll see you next time. Peace.